All right, everyone, it's noon, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Haven Spanier, and I'm the Director of Student and Young Alumni Engagement at the UofSC Alumni Association. We're really excited to put on these Career Day events in partnership with the Career Center. So before I introduce our hosts today, I want to remind you all, if you have any questions throughout the event, our panelists want to hear them, so please type them into the chat feature. If you don't know how to pull that up, there should be a little button across the bottom of your screen that says chat, so you can pull that up. Make sure you type in all of your questions throughout the event in there, and we will do our best to get to all of them today. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome our panelists, starting with Justin Stuckey. Justin drives revenue growth for Politico as an account manager, maintaining and expanding existing partnerships with clients that include Fortune 500 energy companies, PR agencies, and law and lobbying firms. Through daily engagement with policy professionals, he ensures Politico's Pro platform succeeds in helping teams navigate and communicate the complexities of legislative and regulatory decisions. Passionate about all things digital media, he's ready to argue about any film or music takes and enjoys traveling, personal investing, and short form filmmaking. Justin is originally from South Carolina and has lived in the Washington, D.C. area since graduation. Next is Bisha Wanzala. So Bisha is an account manager at Politico, a political media organization in D.C. An Atlanta native, she graduated from the University of South Carolina with a BS in Public Health in 2019. While at UofSC, Bisha developed a passion for politics and policy through her classes, which inspired her to move to Washington, D.C. shortly after graduation to pursue a career in those fields. As an account manager, Bisha is responsible for the retention and growth of existing client accounts in order to generate revenue for the business. And last but not least, Erin Peck. Growing up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Erin was a part of a politically active community and developed an interest in the intersection between business and policy. After graduating from UofSC with a BS in Business Administration, she began her career at Politico. She's now an account manager for Politico Pro, serving a client pool of 400 organizations. Erin is a results-driven marketing and business development professional who is passionate about relationship building, problem solving, and strategic partnerships. So thank you all so much for being here today. I know everyone's really excited to hear from you, and I just love it if y'all could kick it off by introducing yourself and a bit more about what you do at your jobs.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Justin Stuckey. Like Haven said, I'm an account manager. I've been with Politico a little over 2 years. So I originally started as a BDA, Business Development Associate. Graduated from USC in 2017. So I think I'm the oldest grad out of the three of us, which is really putting things into perspective for me. But a little bit about what I do at Politico is I am the main point of contact for a portion of our existing clients. So Politico Pro is a policy intelligence resource for mostly government affairs, policy, communications firms, essentially any teams that need to have a stake in what's going on in Washington, what's going on in terms of following legislative and regulatory developments. So I serve as the main point of contact for a portion of our clients, what we call the HIPO growth pool, high potential growth accounts. So essentially organizations who are on the cusp of being a Fortune 500 company, and organizations that we feel like maybe they're paying a lower dollar rate for our services compared to their annual revenue spend. And so a lot of what I do is touching base with them, making sure we're driving value in terms of their existing resource or existing scope of services, working in tandem with my account management associate to coordinate renewal calls and schedule renewal conversations, and walk them through what their renewal would look like, what the rate will be in terms of their existing scope of business, and also expanding existing accounts. So expanding their current scope to drive value for new resources, new products, new users that may enjoy or see value in Politico. A little bit more about how I got to Politico. I was probably a little bit different from Erin and Bisha. I was not a politics or policy nerd. I didn't even really know what Politico was before I applied. And kind of a sad but funny story is I majored in public health. And so the first job I had out of college was for the USDA, working in their health research field. And long story short, I hated it, realized public health was not for me. I was definitely one of those graduates that spent 3 to 4 years majoring in something that they didn't really want to have a career in. And I remember coming into the USDA office one day, and my supervisor was like so stressed out, and I could just tell on his face something was wrong. And he said, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the Trump administration has cut our funding, and we can't even pay you anymore. Like, this has to be your last day." And on the inside, I was like, yes, like I needed a push to like leave this job and actually do something that I wanted to do. And I'm usually the type of person, like I need someone to kind of hold me accountable to actually like get on my ish a little bit. And so I saw this as a blessing in disguise. And basically I got laid off from that job and spent the next 2 or 3 months thinking very concretely about what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about. And I knew I had always been interested in media, but I also knew I didn't want to necessarily go into journalism as a reporter, and also being in DC, politics and policy also obviously kind of drives this city. So a political media company just seemed like the right fit, but more so on the business side. And that's what drove me to literally Google business entry-level positions, political media companies, and Politico was literally the first one that popped up for the business development associate position. So that's how I got here, and I've obviously enjoyed it. In the two and a half years, I guess I've been here. So it's been an interesting experience, but definitely a beneficial and positive one.
My experience is a little bit similar to Justin's in the sense that we actually were on the same team when I initially joined. So I also came on as a business development associate about 2 years ago. Last week was actually, my work anniversary. So officially hit the 2-year mark at Politico. But a little bit about, my background, how I got to Politico. I majored in management and marketing. I was always sort of interested in how brands communicate. And so, always an interest in media and politics. My minor was political science. And so sort of graduating, trying to marry, what I had learned in college with what I was passionate about, which has always been policy. And I decided to take a few months for myself, and I moved from Columbia, South Carolina to my parents' house and worked part-time at a balloon store called Balloons and Tunes. And I took my time finding a job that made sense for me. I saw a listing for Politico and my eyes lit up. I was very familiar with the brand, and the idea that I could go work there was just so appealing to me. So I didn't care what the job description was. I didn't even read it. I applied and was really, lucky to have such a, good interview experience and to start. Again, I started as a business development associate, and I've actually had 3 different roles since I've been here. So I spent about a year driving new business, which is great. It is a different way to look at a product. It's definitely a challenge. It wasn't one I would have initially picked for myself, but the skills that you learn from a direct sales job translate so well in every aspect of your professional growth, whether it's in the current role or roles in the future. It's just one of those things that teaches you skills. And so I used that to transition over to our account management side of the business to learn more about our current clients and what drove value for them, what kept them around, what about our policy reporting was so special to them. And I was fortunate enough to get promoted and land in this role as an account manager. The pool that I manage is a high volume pool, so it's our maintain section. So I have about 400 organizations that I'm responsible for. And similar to Justin, part of my job is checking in on them, making sure the service is working for them. And also, helping them through those renewal processes, expanding their organization's access, if that's what makes sense for them. I sort of view myself as, a consultant. While, it's my job to drive revenue for the business, it's also my job to advise our clients on what works best for them. And that's a really cool part about the pool that I'm in right now, it's a lower dollar value pool, but the idea is to really nurture and maintain these clients. So it's, heavy relationship building, but in a mass because of how many accounts I'm responsible for. So that's, been my journey at Politico, a little bit of how I got there. Certainly was enamored by the brand. And since I've been here, my experience has been incredible. I can't believe it's been 2 years already. That makes me feel a little old. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hey, I'm Bisha, and I have a very similar story to both Erin and Justin. I was also a public health major, very focused on going to either medical or PA school up until senior year. I just sort of started to become very uninterested in that idea. And then in conjunction with that, sort of started to learn about how policy intersects with the healthcare world, and really found myself latching onto that more so than anything in terms of practicing medicine. And so that was when I sort of was like, okay, I would love to move to DC and sort of figure out what I can do in the political or policy sphere and whatever capacity that might look like. So like Erin, I moved home for the summer, sort of took my time figuring out what I wanted to do. And actually my roommate's older sister was working at Politico at the time. And so around graduation sort of told me about the job. And I already knew about the brand, given its reputation, nationally and in DC. So she was like, you should definitely apply and check it out. And so I was hired as an account management associate. So I've always been on the account management team. And I started a year ago, last August. And I also work in the maintain pool, just like Erin. So managing a high volume of accounts and sort of being that link between, their policy needs and sort of how to best get value from the product that we're delivering. And sort of like Erin mentioned, really like curating those personal relationships has been something that I found to be really valuable, both professionally and just kind of in general. It's really helped curate a lot of interpersonal skills that I think moving forward will just, only help me be like a better professional. And I do really appreciate the sort of consultative aspect of the role. And yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. If you wouldn't mind diving in a bit deeper from how your day-to-day has shifted since the pandemic started, not only personally with your working environment, but also maybe with those clients that you're working with.
Yeah, I can go first. So I think internally, in terms of communication, like with my coworkers, it's changed a good bit because like we were talking about our office before this started, but like we have a very modern sort of startup office feel in that it's very open. Like everyone else obviously has desks, but there's also a lot of shared spaces where a lot of people congregate in cafe or different couches or the patio. And I think that's another component of Politico that I really enjoyed, is that it's very modern in terms of the look of the office, but also the majority of people who work on our team are in their 20s and sort of have been also fresh out of college. So it kind of has that startup new tech feel. And I think that has been lost a little bit, obviously being remote. Like we can't just chit chat in the cafe or sort of, I can't hop over or just yell across the pen, as we call it, like we usually do. And then in terms of external communication with our clients, I actually think in a strange way, I feel like we've sort of benefited a little bit from remote life. And I think that's because Politico Pro as a tool is tailor-made for folks who can't be in constant direct face-to-face communication with each other. The way we design our resource is leveraging our reporting team's insights, who, our editorial team can sort of serve as the boots on the ground in Washington and actually update folks who can't be physically in committee hearings or voter markups or those types of sessions, so that we can provide that information for them. So I really feel like externally, there has obviously been some difficulties because companies, corporations, associations, lobby shops, sole proprietors, definitely, like everyone has taken a hit in some way, shape, or form. economically. And so for us as a B2B organization, like that is stressful to negotiate with folks who have had their budget cut by 30%, right? And our job is to still maintain a sales quota and still retain that book of business, which is very difficult given the climate we're in. But I think that now more than ever, folks are seeing the value in Politico Pro, and so it kind of helps us even drive more value for our clients as to why it's such a really important resource for them now.
Yep. I'm sort of bouncing off Justin's last point. I think, the product is proved extremely valuable to our clients in these times. And also a lot of them have reconnected sort of with the resource that they're paying for in a way that they weren't before. We work with a lot of people who are on the go, whether it's a lobbyist or a lawyer or a government affairs team, they, wear a lot of hats, and they are, not typically people who sit down in front of their computer. And now for the first time in a long time, they are. So they're reaching out to us a lot more. They're learning more about our product and, what tools are available to them. And so it's helped with those moments of budgetary, cuts being a concern. We're really able to prove to them that now more than ever that the resource is worth it. And then, from a personal standpoint, I miss the office. Don't get me wrong, working from home has been great, not having to do the commute every morning and all of that. But as Justin mentioned, our office is, one, beautiful, and two, really built to create relationships between all of us. Our team especially is very close. We all know each other pretty well, a really good rapport. We all work well together. And so I, miss a little bit that brainstorming, collaborative feel that we had in the office, whether it was, talking about a problem that a client's having, how can we help them, or, just catching up with people over coffee in the cafe. It's different now. Zoom is incredible in helping us all connect, and, we have a chat feature as well, but it just feels a little bit different than it used to. So, I do long for my commute at this moment. I think I would sit in traffic if it meant I could, see everybody. So I think as soon as I have to go back into the office, I might regret having ever said that. But at least for the moment, I really do miss it. I miss my coworkers. Bisha and I were actually promoted while we were remote. So we've never even sort of in our full capacity been in the office in our new roles. So, that was definitely something that was a change, and learning this job remotely was a bit daunting, but, it turned out just fine due to the support of incredible managers and, my peers that I already knew. But definitely different, good for our clients, sad for us, but, life keeps moving.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with it sort of being like an inverse effect. So externally with clients, with sort of the nature of work from home and definitely having more flexibility to, my schedule and theirs as well. It's definitely allowed me to have a lot more face time with them. So like Erin said, being able to work around people's budgets and work a lot more intimately with them, given that they are at home now and not like me having to chase them around because they're on the go all of the time. So that's something that I've actually found to be really, really good. Like, I think it's a lot stronger of a relationship than maybe when we were all in the office. But as Erin and Justin both mentioned, one of my favorite parts about working at Politico is the team that I do work with and the office space. And as much as sort of waking up and getting on the metro can be unamusing at times, it was always great once I got to the office and sort of got to make breakfast and like catch up on everyone's weekend, etc. And then again, just to be able to sort of be like, hey, like, what would you do in this sort of client situation, or what would your opinion be on XYZ, is a lot easier and a lot more efficient just when you can sort of turn around at your desk and do it, versus sort of having to like flip someone's calendar, make sure they're not busy, and sort of, go through hoops and loops to just do a quick brainstorming session. And then to sort of learning a new role and having like the tediousness of trying to like get the hang of things. But again, doing it virtually was definitely a challenge that, yeah, I would have loved to be in the office. And then too, on the other hand of that, to sort of be in the pen as a manager with the other managers and start to like curate those relationships would be really nice. But I'm eagerly anticipating the day that we get to go back. So.
Just sort of a plug off that for anyone like looking for jobs, we might all be remote now, but like work culture is really important. And so I would still push you to sort of inquire about what that was like sort of pre-COVID and what it might look like in the future, because it makes a huge difference on like the quality of the job. I like my job so much because of that culture. So, just something to keep in mind.
Definitely important. Thanks. So it sounds like you guys have all kind of come from different backgrounds as far as what you studied in school, maybe took some untraditional paths to your job today. So this is kind of a two-part question, but one, do you think that that is typical in your organization? And then for anyone who's listening, even if they're a student or an alumni who might be interested in working for Politico, what advice would you give them if they're trying to kind of beef up their resume for a job in your organization?
Could you repeat the first part of that question one more time?
Yeah, it was just, do you think it's typical, do a lot of your coworkers also come from kind of like a winding path to get to Politico, or do you think a lot of them studied political science or, sales if they're an account manager?
I guess I've never really thought about it. I would say that the majority, I do think most of our team probably did major in political science or something in that realm, whether it be public policy or something sort of in that threshold. But, I majored in public health, Bisha majored in public health, Erin, I think, majored in marketing. Like it just sort of depends. I think that the majority of our team, it's more so about their interests in policy and politics as opposed to if they majored in it or not. Because people, like myself, they major in something throughout college and they graduate and realize it's very different from what they actually want to do. So it depends. And I feel like what's good about this organization is that from what I've seen, and I also actually serve on our interview committee for people who are applying now, we're more so interested in why they want this role now as opposed to like what their major was and what we feel like, if everything they learned in their current program like really aligns with this sales role. Because I think the thing about sales is that no one kind of intended to wind up in sales, and then they do. It just sort of happens. I don't know how else to describe it, but I don't think anyone in college on our team was like, I'm going to graduate and start in sales, but it sometimes just happens that way. And so what's nice is you can kind of find your way there, even if you didn't major in something specific to sales or business. And then I think the second question you asked, I think, was just around what folks can do who are applying in terms of their resume and applications. I think one thing that's super important, and I feel like I see this a lot interviewing people, is like, you really have to sort of tailor whether it's like a resume, a cover letter, or just when you're interviewing and talking with someone, you have to really tailor the skills that you develop to this specific role. Like a lot of the times when we meet as a committee and talk about whether we thought a candidate really interviewed well, a lot of times it's really just about whether we feel like they have a good grasp on what this job is. And if we spend more time talking about why they feel prepared and aligned for this role as like, I'm trying to think of another, as opposed to, everything that they did in their background. Like I can kind of read your resume and check the box there. But I would say in terms of like a cover letter or a face-to-face interaction, or not, I guess face-to-face interaction, even virtual if you're interviewing, really make sure the conversation is dominated around why this specific role at this specific company, and tailor it. Like people can tell when your resume or your cover letter is sort of made to be sent out to like 200 different people because it's not specific enough. And so I've been talking about this with my own younger brother because he just graduated from USC and he's been on the job search. And I've been explaining to him, like, you really have to figure out if someone has a bucket of 100 different resumes, like why do you separate from that pack? And usually it's going to be because I am more fit for this specific position.
Yeah. In terms of sort of a uncommon, way that we got here, my background was marketing. I certainly didn't go into a marketing job. So I don't think, what I learned in school is necessarily what I do now. Even with my minor being political science, we we're looking at like the history of policy. That's not really what I work with now. I'm working with what's going on currently. But I actually think it serves people really well to have sort of random-ish backgrounds when coming into sales, because you draw on a lot of knowledge that's not exactly sales-based. It's, you know, about relationships and, you know, communication with our pros. So I think weirdly, some of the jobs that were the most helpful to me doing this job were, you know, I was a camp counselor. I drew a lot of skills that, you know, I used as a camp counselor for this job. And the balloon shop I worked at was a small business. So I wore a bunch of different hats. I was familiar with the idea of my role being multifaceted. And so I agree with Justin about sort of letting those experiences that are not maybe perfect for, you might not think are perfect for sales, find the life skills that you learned from those. And like, those are the important things to highlight and talk about when, you know, looking for jobs. Again, I was so excited by just the idea of working at Politico. I didn't even read the job description when I applied. You know, I was lucky that I sort of got that first interview and a chance to take a second and to curate myself to the role. But I think, you know, as Justin said, nobody graduates thinking they were going to go into sales. I actually was even further than that. I swore I wasn't going into sales. I said up and down, I wasn't going to do it. A bunch of my friends had already gotten jobs by the time we'd graduated. Most of them were in sales. And I'd sort of written that entire piece off because I didn't truly understand what a sales job was. And I'm really glad that I sort of accidentally took the plunge into sales, because it's so much more than just sort of what you think about when you think about a salesperson. It's a really fun job, really fast-paced. Again, you wear a bunch of different hats. Every day can look a lot different, whereas, you know, some jobs, every day is pretty much the same. My days do not look the same every day, and I really enjoy that variety in my role. And I think, you know, having sort of a wonky background or past to get to this job actually served me really well. So there's no perfect background for sales. Everyone can do sales.
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree with all of that. I think in terms of uncommon backgrounds, because of the brand of Politico, it just attracts so many different characters. Like Erin said, like, you kind of don't even really read the job description because you're just like, oh, wow, like, sure, I'll work at Politico. And I think I definitely didn't need my public health degree. Like, I could certainly do this job without it, but I would say I couldn't do this job if I'd never been a server or a bartender for like as long as I was. And in both my initial interview with Politico and then my interview to become a manager, those were some of the things that I highlighted the most: my serving experience, working at the front desk at like Orange Theory, things like that. And like Justin said, really curating and tailoring everything that I've done, both, you know, in my life and then also within my role at Politico, to the specific role, and sort of showing, you know, how I was going to be successful at that role. I literally, like, when I was preparing for my manager interview, just had the job roll up the entire time. And as I was prepping, I was like, all right, how do I answer this question specifically? How do I show these examples to show, like, this is exactly what I will do and this is how I'll do it, and managed to be successful at that. So yeah, I think definitely tailoring it so specifically is a path to success in terms of interviewing.
I actually, similar to Bisha, took the manager job description, put it in Excel, and broke out like each section by, you know, what they were asking for, and like forced myself to think about good examples of how I demonstrated that. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons we were successful in you know, getting the manager position, was knowing to tailor exactly what the job description was with our experience. Because in one way or another, you know, almost any person has the right experience for an entry-level sales job. It's just about digging deep and finding those moments or those experiences for yourself.
That's great. So I want to continue on this topic, actually, because it sounds like all of you guys have had multiple roles at Politico since you started. So for anyone who is watching today, who is maybe wanting to move up in their organization or just try out something different in their organization, what tips would you have for them to get that opportunity?
I think what worked for me is that you kind of have to control what you can control, and what I mean by that is, like, you don't know when the ideal position that you really want may open up. And so I think what helped me is that I was trying to find ways that I could take on other opportunities in my current role, but other opportunities that would make me prepared for the role I wanted once it was available. And I think, like any good manager, if you put together an actual plan, any good manager will like definitely would love for you to do that, and definitely would take ownership of helping you sort of develop those skills to the ideal role that you want. And luckily here at Politico, like, I had actually a couple of managers who I think, I put together a very concrete plan of like where I wanted to be, what my hopeful timeline would be, and I think the clear thing was what I was doing currently, what I was doing in my existing role to make myself ready for that. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. And also just like, I can't stress enough the power of just talking to people in different areas, even if you don't feel like it's maybe the ideal thing that you want. Like, just talk to them just to get a sense of what they do. That's another thing I like about Politico, is that I've had conversations with folks in the newsroom about certain things, folks on our communications team, our advertising team, and obviously pro. Like, it really is a good way to talk to folks who are really smart, who are really sharp, and really have a ton of very impressive experience. And you don't maybe get that at a Fortune 500 company. Like, the CEO knows who I am. Like, I've been able to have a couple conversations with him, and he also, I think, I don't think it was that he went to USC. His wife, I think, graduated from USC. So like, that was a common bond. So I would say, leverage the resources you do have, and the skills you can build in your current role, so that when something opens up that you think you're ready for, you literally can say, hey, I've technically already been doing it.
Yep. My first role here, as I mentioned, I was a BDA, and so that's new business. And that area of sales can be hard. And so, my first couple of months, I was sort of having a little bit of shock. Is this for me? Will I be able to grow in this role? And I think I was really fortunate in, similar to what Justin said, I connected with who my managers were at the time, and, other people at the organization, to sort of talk about what I really loved about my role, and to figure out what good next steps could be. I learned a ton in my new business capacity, but I realized the thing that my manager helped point out to me, the thing that I identified with the most was sort of that collaborative aspect of working with our clients, like a little bit past that initial conversation, which led me to be able to take on an opportunity on the account management team. And, just sort of leaning into what parts of the job feel good, and also having a full understanding that not all parts of your job are great, and it's a job and it's hard work, but there will be things that you really connect with, and to figure out what your next steps are around the pieces of your job that you do really enjoy. I would argue, even if someone thinks they hate everything about their job, they're actually wrong, and that there's a couple of things that they do really enjoy, and to lean into those, to figure out sort of what next steps are. And so that's how I landed on the account management team, and it fit for me perfectly. And so that sort of helped me align my career and next steps, and take, an additional role of being an account manager. So no longer supporting someone, just having my own book of business. And, I think if you had asked me in my first 6 months if I was ever going to be a manager at Politico, I think I would have been a little skeptical. And so it was through conversations with peers and managers to sort of, again, lean into what felt good, what I was good at. So super blessed, and also just sort of a PSA of, even if you think your job's hard, to stick it out, and, don't shy away from the challenge. Because again, a lot of people have this weird persona of what sales is, and I certainly did. But if I hadn't sort of gone through sort of the tougher beginning pieces of my professional career, I wouldn't have found the part of sales that really fits for me and been able to grow my career in the way that I have.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think my biggest advice, sort of similar to what Justin was saying, is just taking advantage of the network around you. I was confident that I didn't want to move up at Politico, like I didn't want to be a manager. And then the difference in that was when I was able to sort of find a mentor who, like Erin said, told me to lean into what I did like about the job and focus less on what I didn't like about it. And then from that point on, I realized, oh, maybe I actually do enjoy this and would want to sort of move up further and have my own book of business, as Erin mentioned. And so just, yeah, really identifying people who can sort of help guide you, especially too, like it was my first job. Like I sort of didn't really have a good grasp on sort of where you go next once you've been in an entry-level position for a certain amount of time. So it was really helpful for my just figuring out my next year plan, even having somebody to sort of be like, okay, this is, you know, again, what you're good at. And so focus on that, lean into that, and then just see where it can take you, even if it's not necessarily here at Politico. But again, just sort of capitalizing on the things that you enjoy. Because if you enjoyed it, it's not going to feel like work, even when it's really hard work. So.
Okay, we've got some participant questions going in the chat. So thank you guys to those of you who have asked questions. Keep them coming. We will try to get to all of them. But the first one I want to ask y'all is, what's the biggest lesson you learned when you first started at Politico? Give you a moment to think about it.
Mine is probably a simple one. I think it's just the importance of communication. I think something we ask a lot of people now is like, what's your communication style? And if someone had asked me that when I first started as a business development associate, I would be like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I have no idea. But I realized when I first started, my style was like a little too laid back and sort of like, yeah, just give me a minute. I'll do it on my own and I'll come to you if I need help. And sometimes that doesn't work because when you mess something up, your manager's like, see, if you had like walked me through this beforehand, we could have avoided this issue. And so I think that was something that I struggle with a little bit of like, I'm not going to say anything because either I don't want them to think I need help and think that I'm not good at what I'm doing, or also just like, I don't want someone to micromanage me. So I'm just going to do it and figure it out. But I think the majority of our managers here just want to be a resource. Like they want to be helpful. And so when they want more communication from you, at least in my experience, it genuinely isn't because they want to be micromanaging. It's just because they want to ensure that everyone's on the same page. You know, when you're an associate working with your manager, or what we call your account executive, if you're on new business, the two of you, it's so much of an easier revenue partnership when the two are in sync together, and when they're not, it's just kind of a mess. And so that was probably the biggest thing I learned, is that even when you think something is not that big of a deal to bring up, just to cover your bases, it just makes sense to just be open about it.
That's a good one, Justin. Yeah, we do talk a lot about communication styles at Politico. I don't think I ever thought I would spend so much time talking with a manager about how I like to be communicated with, but it makes a huge difference. I think the biggest lesson that I learned when I first started, because I started on a team that I didn't end up, staying with forever, was a little bit of what I touched on before, of like, it's okay for it to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. And, finding the things that made me excited about this job were important. So, taking on the most positive mindset that you can with any entry-level position, because it's entry-level. It's not always supposed to be perfect fit. So sort of leaning into what was uncomfortable was a lesson for me. And, maybe if I had leaned in a little bit quicker, I might have found my perfect team a little bit sooner. But, understanding that the work can be hard, and just taking on that positive mindset, sort of regardless of what challenge is put in front of me, Definitely a lesson that I, had to learn to sort of figure out how I connected with sales, like how does sales work for me? And so, just leaning into what's tough about being a professional adult.
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest lesson that honestly I'm still learning on a day-to-day basis was sort of advocating for myself. Especially being fresh out of college, it's kind of a jarring transition from classroom to office, and the relationships that you have with teachers are not the relationship that you're going to have with a manager or just even a colleague necessarily. So sort of having to learn how to, advocate for myself, and then to Justin's point, communicate that with others, both superiors and just your other colleagues, was definitely the biggest thing that I had to learn and implement when I first started at Politico.
All right, next question is, how important are writing skills in sales and marketing?
Do you guys want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure.
I think I would say that they're pretty important.
They're learnable.
They're learnable, yes. I think you definitely learn as you go. We send so many emails throughout the day that your writing just sort of becomes better with the nature of the repetition. So I think they're important, but they're not something if you're not necessarily a great writer, like I certainly wasn't when I started, it's not anything that you're not gonna just be able to learn.
Yeah, and also messing up is also part of how you learn. So getting all of those reps in and sort of learning what communication got attention from clients or potential clients and what didn't is how I curtail. I wouldn't have considered myself an extremely strong writer coming in. I've definitely misspelled a word or two in an email before, but I still think I'm effective in my outreach, but only because of the repetition that I did once I started professionally. So if you come in with really strong writing skills, it will definitely serve you, and the sort of learning curve won't be as steep, but they're learnable, and practice makes perfect.
I agree with that. And I think also going off of the learnable part, you kind of have to come in with the understanding that you probably are not a good business sales writer. And what I mean by that is I was someone who actually thought I was a good writer, but that's because I was thinking about it in terms of traditional English courses or writing an essay or paper. And sales and business writing is just not like that at all. I remember I would be writing emails when I first started as an associate, and my manager was looking over them, and he's like, "You write like you speak," but he said it in an annoyed way, why would you do this? No one's going to want to read this. And what he was basically saying is, in business and sales writing, you have to be as efficient as possible, because especially a lot of these CEOs and VPs, they don't have 45 seconds to look through this email. You have to learn how to get to the point. And I tell people it's sort of about trying to drive as much value in such a tight window as possible. And that's just something where a lot of people coming out of college probably will not know how to do. And so I think the good thing is, if you're open to being taught and open to sort of messing up and knowing that you probably won't have it down, it's not that difficult to learn it.
Yeah, it's sort of a funny going off that, some CEOs will respond to us TY for thank you, or so you can be as great and professional as you want in your sales and writing, and at the end of the day, it's about getting your message across. And not everyone has fantastic email skills, but it doesn't mean they're not, a really incredible, employee or, capable of doing the job.
Yeah, going off of that in the beginning, you put so much emphasis on I hope you've been well, and sincerely, comma, and
exclamation points.
Yeah, per my last note. And then you'll get literally a VP of communications at Google who's just great, thanks. That. I mean, somebody just skip that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You also kind of have to learn how to match people's tone. That's definitely something I learned in this role. whether it's like phone, vocal communication, or via email, you just kind of have to tailor it to what type of vibe you get from them.
That's definitely a great suggestion. All right, next question is a bit more like specific, but it says lots of organizations are currently on hiring freezes due to financial hardships from the pandemic. So have you all seen challenges with renewals for Politico Pro at the start of the new federal fiscal year on October 1st? Or just in general, have you seen those financial hardships with your clients?
Well, one quick plug, Politico is hiring, so we don't have a hiring freeze, but I understand what the question's getting at. So from a personnel perspective, I've definitely seen, some of my clients being hesitant to expand scope because they're no longer bringing on new people for the foreseeable future. But I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. The renewal process has definitely changed for us. Maybe it takes a couple more conversations around why they should be paying for this. But ultimately, I've found that most of our clients value us up there with an employee and wanting to retain the service. And a lot of the time, sort of the way that we frame it is Politico makes it so you don't need to have those additional employees sometimes. It can do the job of some of the lower level, maybe analysts, for example. So again, it's not without challenges, but I would say surprisingly, we have done pretty well in getting our clients to retain our services, even when they're in hiring freezes, their budgets have been cut. It's just a little bit of a different conversation and expressing sort of empathy around the situation. I mean, Politico was not immune to what's going on with the pandemic and the crisis either. So we certainly understand. Yeah, I think it's just a more conversational experience, making sure they understand that we get it and that we'll do what we can to help them through the process.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen it with my personal client pool. A lot of people are unsure if their business will even exist next year. But like Erin said, the value of Pro is still there for them, and it's still something that they very much want and need to do their work every day. And so it does take those few extra conversations and maybe a few extra concessions on my end. But at the end of the day, like, what I want is for them to stay on, and what they want is to still have Pro. And consistently, that's been the theme thus far, despite some hardships here and there.
Yeah, and one thing I've seen is that a lot of times when folks are stressing their budgetary spending and the cuts that have been happening, a lot of times it's because they just really, really want to ensure that the resources they're paying for, they're actually seeing substantial value for, which is like the purpose of our jobs, right? Like that's why we're here, is to drive as much value for them as possible. And so when folks are talking about consolidating to one resource, truthfully, when people say that to me, when my clients say that to me, I feel even more confident, because I think usually Pro does win compared to some competitors. Maybe not on just a straight sense of like the lowest price, but usually the most value that people will get from it is Politico Pro. And so I think we feel pretty empowered in that regard. Because as all three of us have mentioned, now more than ever, I think folks are actually seeing the importance of their subscription and leveraging resources and tools that they didn't really pay attention to a year ago because they felt like they just maybe didn't need to. And so now, thankfully each quarter thus far this year, we've hit our goals, but I think everyone feels pretty confident that we'll continue to see that because folks are still seeing value in it.
Yep. I mean, and that value comes from our reporting team. We have the most incredible reporters. Like, we talk a lot about this product, but like what we do best is our news, and people know that and they come to us for it. And so in a time that feels so uncertain, I think people know that they can get sort of the right information from us, and they trust that. So it makes those harder conversations a little bit easier when I can say with absolute confidence that, our reporters do the best job.
All right, I have one more two-part question for you guys, unless anyone else who's watching wants to type in any last burning questions. But two parts for you. One, what is the most challenging part of your job? And then two, what's your favorite part of your job?
I can go first. I think the most challenging is that in sales you can do everything in your power that was supposedly right. Like you can do everything you should have done, and then a deal or a client just might not renew, or a deal just might not come in. And it could be completely out of your control, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you really nailed your X amount of meetings with them. Sometimes it just doesn't close, and you have to just have the mindset of moving on, because there's going to be so many more evaluations that you have to work through. And so in a sense, you can't really get attached to one deal or one client or one evaluation, because it's not personal. Like I've had people tell me, what we call a verbal, like tell me they're going to renew, or tell me a big upsell unit is going to come in, and then it does not. And it just happens. It's this sense of business, a sense of sales. And like I said, you can't get attached to those things. And then the most rewarding, I would say, is working for a company that is really important to a huge group of people and shapes the way we talk about politics and policy. Like I think now more than ever this year, I've seen that. Like it's really cool for me when my friends will send me a Politico article and they will like rant about, not about our editorial insight, but just about everything going on. But like because of the fact that they learned about this stuff through Politico's reporting, you know what I mean? And to me, that's really cool that we work for an organization and position and pitch, like Erin said, our editorial content, which is truthfully like unbiased. I'm going to say this, like it is the best policy-driven reporting in DC. You feel empowered that you can have that to rely on, and that you are in an organization that, especially with this upcoming election, is always at the forefront of conversations happening on Twitter or whatever because of some of our reporting. And so that, to me, that's really cool and really, really timely given everything going on.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything Justin said. For me, the biggest challenges in sales, it's volume. It's high volume all the time. There's always work to be done. And so it can feel overwhelming. You can also feel like 8 hours isn't enough to get your work done, because candidly, you could work a completely solid 8 hours and you're still going to have things that in theory you could do to keep working, to find another deal or to close another contract. So, understanding how to be efficient and maintaining my work-life balance. So making sure I put in the right amount of effort for the right time, and then being okay stepping away at the end of the day, because it's just an extremely high volume. That sales is nonstop. The joke is, money never sleeps, and it doesn't, and it can feel like you can't step away, but you can. But just high volume. And then in terms of my favorite part about this job, I am in sales, and sort of traditionally people think that everyone in sales is entirely money motivated, and don't get me wrong, money is what I need to pay my rent, to live in this world, but I wouldn't consider myself money motivated. So it's the relationships that I build with both my coworkers and my clients that make this job so fun and rewarding. Getting to give a concession to a client that's really meaningful and them be so appreciative, or just getting to learn more about their work. It's really fun to get on the phone with people. We do a lot of our conversations via email, but when I get to get on the phone or on Zoom with a client, getting to talk to people makes the day more interesting, and you learn things that you never would have otherwise known. I feel like I know so much about FERC, for example, one agency, from a client that I got to talk to, and I never would have had that conversation had it not been for this job. So I think it's a really fun job because you're working, with other people. I don't really feel like I'm sitting behind a computer all day, just sort of screaming into the void. I'm talking to real people all day long, and it's really fun.
I would definitely say in terms of challenging, not taking things personally for me has always been hard sometimes, like certain just like units or certain clients, like when things don't go right, kind of like Justin said, being able to step away from it and just moving on, because it is such a fast-paced world and there's not really time to sort of dwell on things that don't work out. So that's something that I have like ups and downs with for sure. And then in terms of rewards, I love politics. I love policy. Like in my free time, it's what I'm interested in. It's what I read up on all the time. So just sort of being able to be surrounded by it. I know that's one of the parts I miss about the office the most, is just sort of walking around and like you're in a newsroom and you're sort of seeing in real time what's going on. And again, like Justin said, so many different people are relying on the information that we're providing. So just being able to like be a part of that world and have such like up close access to all of this policy and politics information for me is always really rewarding. And it's what, at the end of the day, like what makes me want to work at Politico forever, because it's just such a cool environment to be in. Like I love that stuff. So
like, small plug, all of our reporters are in the same office as us. So we see them in the cafe, we interact with them all the time. So being that sort of close to the action, even though we're the business side of the operation, is really cool.
Like you can literally be in the caf and like be watching CNN and like one of our reporters is downstairs like filming for CNN. And I'm just like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you all like today's event and you want to see more, you can go over to uofscalumni.org/events for more of our upcoming events. But we'll be sending out a survey and a recording of today's event if you want to go back to anything they said, maybe advice if you're interested in working in this field. But again, thank you three so much for your time today. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone did as well. But y'all have a good one.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.